They say home is where the heart heals, but for me, the truth is that home can also be where it breaks apart. I'm Maricela, born in 1954 in Lisbon, Portugal. Back in 1972, when I was just 18, I joined the military, believing discipline and duty would shield me from the chaos of life. I felt strong, armored by service and routine, but then something happened that pierced me deeper than any battlefield wound. Today, at 71, sitting in a quiet apartment by the Miami shoreline, I'm finally sharing this because silence no longer comforts me. If you're listening, drop your city below and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep these stories alive. I had retired earlier than anyone expected. My knees had been aching for years, my back complained with every shift in weather, and after one too many nights waking in cold sweat from memories of conflict, I decided enough was enough. No one knew my plans, not even my son. I wanted it to be a surprise. I hadn't seen him properly in 2 years, only through the small windows of video calls where his voice always sounded distracted, as if weighed down by something unsaid. He lived in Miami, far from the quiet rhythms of my European hometown, and I told myself it was time to bridge that distance. The flight was long, but anticipation kept me awake. I imagined the moment. I would knock on his door, and he would open it with those same deep brown eyes he had as a child. We would embrace, laugh, maybe cry. He'd ask why I hadn't told him, and I'd grin like the stubborn mother I was, saying, because surprises make the heart younger. That dream held me until the cab turned onto a street in a leafy Miami neighborhood. The house I saw was not the one I remembered from my last visit. The paint on the porch railing had peeled away in streaks, the front garden was choked with weeds, and the blinds hung unevenly. My chest tightened with unease. I pulled my suitcase to the front steps, trying to convince myself it was nothing, a busy life, perhaps, or forgotten chores. But when I knocked, no one answered. I pressed the bell again. Silence. Across the street, an older neighbor stepped out with a dog tugging at its leash. She paused, tilting her head at me. "Are you looking for Daniel?" she asked. "Yes," I said quickly. "I'm his mother." I came to surprise him. Her expression shifted from curiosity to sympathy, and that alone told me everything was wrong. "Oh dear," she murmured. "He's been in the hospital. Intensive care. It's been, maybe 2 weeks now." The ground slipped under me. "Hospital? 2 weeks?" My voice shook. "Yes. I'm sorry you had to find out this way." She hesitated, then added, "His wife hasn't been around much. I saw online that she's been in the Bahamas, posting pictures on boats and beaches." I felt my pulse hammering in my temples. A party? Beaches? While my son was in the ICU. I thanked the neighbor in a voice that barely carried, grabbed my bag, and called another cab with trembling fingers. The hospital air smelled of antiseptic and weary hope. I hurried to the reception desk, asking for Daniel, and the nurse led me down a corridor of beeping machines and hushed voices. When I entered his room, my heart fractured. There he was, my only child, lying frail on the bed, his skin pale, his frame wasted. His eyes fluttered open weakly, and when they landed on me, a faint smile ghosted across his lips. "May," he whispered in Portuguese, his voice so faint I leaned close to hear. "It's me, my darling." "I'm here now," I whispered back, clasping his hand. It was cold and thin in mine, yet he squeezed with surprising strength, as if needing to anchor himself to me. The doctor explained that Daniel had advanced gastric cancer, discovered too late for treatment to offer much. They had tried everything, but his body was failing. I listened in stunned silence, the words crashing like waves I couldn't resist. "Where's Brianna?" I asked finally. The doctor hesitated, glancing away. "She hasn't visited often. He's mostly been alone." That night, I sat by his side, stroking his hair, whispering prayers, and recalling lullabies I had once sung when he was small. My eyes burned with tears I refused to shed in front of him. Every rise and fall of his chest felt like a countdown, each breath borrowed time. By morning, Daniel's condition worsened. He turned his head slightly toward me, lips trembling with effort. "Don't blame yourself," he managed. "Just be here." "I'm here," I promised, clutching his hand as if I could hold him in this world a little longer. A few hours later, as sunlight filtered through the blinds, he exhaled one last shuddering breath. My world stilled. The monitors flatlined, and though nurses hurried in, I knew my son was gone. I held him for a long time, pressing my cheek against his still chest, my tears finally spilling freely. Grief burned through me like fire, but beneath it, another flame sparked anger. Anger at his wife, who should have been here, who should have held his hand instead of parading on yachts. When I left the hospital that evening, the Miami streets felt alien, every laugh and honk a cruel reminder that life marched on while mine had shattered. I returned to his house, dragging my suitcase inside. The place smelled of dust and neglect. Empty takeout boxes were stacked on the counter, unpaid bills littered the table, and the sink overflowed with dishes. My heart clenched. He had been struggling long before the hospital. That night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through social media. There she was, his wife, Brianna, posting smiling photos in bikinis, cocktails in hand, captions about living my best life. My jaw clenched. While he wasted away in a hospital bed, she was celebrating under the sun. The betrayal felt like a blade twisting in my chest. Grief sharpened into suspicion. Something was deeply wrong, and I knew I could not rest until I uncovered the truth. I sat in the dim light of Daniel's living room, my suitcase unopened by the door, the glow from my phone burning into my tired eyes. Every post Brianna shared was a slap: her laughter at beach clubs, her champagne toasts, her posing on sleek white yachts. My son had died hours earlier, and yet here was the woman who had vowed to love him in sickness and in health, dancing under strobe lights as if she had no husband at all. Grief is heavy, but anger has a way of waking every nerve. I pulled out the small notebook Daniel had kept on his coffee table. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, filled with neat handwriting and dated entries. But as I read, my breath quickened. Each page listed payments. Medicine $800, roof repairs $1,200, car insurance $450. Yet the amounts were too high, and something about them gnawed at me. My son had always been meticulous, careful with money. Why were there so many large withdrawals in the weeks when he had been too sick to even drive? The following morning, I marched to the bank, my heart pounding like a drum. I explained who I was, produced my identification, and after tense discussions, they allowed me to review his recent accounts. What I saw made my stomach lurch. Thousands of dollars had been spent on yacht rentals, high-end jewelry, designer clothing. All charged to Daniel's credit cards, all approved under his account. The dates matched the very days she had posted her extravagant trips. I pressed my trembling hands to my face, fury burning hotter with every second. She had been draining him dry while he withered away. She had stood by as cancer ate him alive, only to use his last strength as fuel for her vanity. That night, I drove to the beachfront bar I knew she frequented. I spotted her instantly, laughing with friends, her blonde hair catching the neon glow, a cocktail in her manicured hand. My hands shook as I approached. "Brianna," I said sharply. Her smile faltered for only a moment before she raised her brows. "Oh, Maricela. I didn't expect to see you here. Shouldn't you be at the hospital?" The audacity made my teeth clench. "Daniel died this morning." She sipped her drink, barely flinching. "That's sad. But he was suffering, wasn't he? Maybe it's for the best." My voice cracked like a whip. "The best? He begged for you. He needed you, and you were here, flaunting yourself on boats." Her laugh was soft, cruel. "Listen, I have a life too. I can't put everything on hold just because he was sick. Besides," she leaned closer, her voice dripping with arrogance, "everything he had was mine as well. His money, his cards, his house. That's the law, isn't it? Wife inherits. So don't bother trying to guilt me." The rage that coursed through me nearly toppled me. "You won't get away with this," I whispered, trembling. "Watch me," she replied, turning back to her friends as though I were an inconvenience rather than a grieving mother. I left that bar shaking, but my mind had sharpened. She believed the law would protect her, that her title as wife gave her license to loot. She didn't know me. I had spent decades in the military, navigating rules, regulations, systems designed to hide corruption. I knew there were always cracks in the wall, and I was prepared to push until the whole thing collapsed. The next morning, I made a call to someone I had not spoken to in years, Javier Ortiz. He had served with me back in my early days, and now he worked in military financial administration in Tampa. When his deep, familiar voice came through the line, I nearly wept with relief. Maricela? It's been ages. What's wrong? My son is dead, I said plainly, swallowing hard. And his wife has been robbing him blind while he wasted away. I need help. There was silence, then the sound of Javier's steady exhale. Send me everything. Statements, receipts, anything you can find. I'll see what I can do. I spent hours gathering evidence, photographs of Brianna's social posts alongside bank withdrawals, copies of Daniel's notebook entries, receipts I found tucked in drawers and beneath cushions. When I handed them over to Javier a few days later in Tampa, his expression darkened with each page he read. This is financial abuse, he muttered. Neglect and exploitation. If she thinks being his wife shields her, she's mistaken. I can freeze his accounts temporarily while we push this through the courts. For the first time since Daniel's death, a flicker of power returned to me. Do it, I urged. Within hours, her cards declined. Her access to his accounts evaporated like smoke. And when I returned to Daniel's house that evening, I could already imagine the panic on her face when her privileges crumbled. But freezing the money was only the beginning. I scoured every inch of the house, searching for more. In his bedside drawer, I found more notebook pages with records of payments labeled for her supposed needs: medicine, therapy, car repairs. Yet each note carried a bitterness, as if he knew even then he was being deceived. The final straw came when I confronted her again, this time in the empty house she had abandoned. She stormed in after realizing her access was gone, her heels clacking on the tile floor. You did this, she accused, pointing at me with shaking hands. You froze my accounts. They were never yours, I snapped. They were Daniel's. He trusted you, and you betrayed him. While he starved in a hospital bed, you paraded like a queen. Her eyes blazed. I'm his wife. Everything he had belongs to me. I stepped closer, my voice low and cold. No. What you own now is shame, and soon you'll own nothing else. Her fury was palpable, but mine was stronger. The next week, armed with Javier's guidance and my growing file of evidence, I took her to court. The courtroom was stark, the air buzzing with whispers as our case unfolded. I presented every receipt, every social media post, every page of Daniel's notebook. The judge's expression hardened with each revelation, until finally, the gavel struck. All assets belonging to Daniel Rodriguez are hereby frozen, the judge declared. Temporary control of the estate is granted to his mother, Maricela. Brianna Rodriguez is prohibited from accessing funds or property pending full investigation. I exhaled, a weight lifting from my shoulders. Brianna's face twisted with disbelief, her painted lips parting in protest, but no sound came. For once, she was powerless. As I walked out of the courthouse that day, the Miami sun glinting off the marble steps, I carried both grief and justice in my chest. Daniel was gone, but I had protected what little remained of him. And yet, deep inside, I knew this story wasn't over. Money and punishment would never be enough. If Daniel's suffering was to mean anything, I needed to turn his pain into something greater, something that would live long after Brianna's selfishness was forgotten. After the court's ruling, I stood outside in the sticky Miami heat, my hand clutching the small folder of legal documents as if it were a shield. For a brief moment, the world felt still. The courthouse steps beneath my feet seemed almost holy, as though they had absorbed the weight of my battle and acknowledged that justice, at least in part, had been served. Brianna had walked out pale and silent, stripped of the confidence she once flaunted. She glared at me as though I had stolen her crown, but for the first time, I didn't flinch. The silence in Daniel's house was unbearable when I returned that evening. The walls seemed to echo with memories of him laughing, his voice weaving through the hallways. Yet the truth of his absence pressed down heavily. I sat in his room, staring at the notebook that had become both my weapon and my wound. Every page whispered of his patience, his attempts to justify her expenses, his hope that perhaps she loved him enough to change. My chest ached with both pride for his forgiving heart and sorrow for how it had been broken. The next morning, I woke with a determination I hadn't felt in years. Justice in the courtroom was not the end. I wanted more, something that would honor him, something Brianna could never tarnish. I began to make calls, reaching out to charities, hospitals, and community centers. Each conversation reminded me of how many were struggling as Daniel had, fighting illnesses not only of the body, but of loneliness and abandonment. An idea formed, fierce and bright. I would build something in his name. A place of refuge for those left behind, forgotten by family, betrayed by those who should have loved them most. I filed the paperwork for a nonprofit, naming it the Daniel Foundation, and within weeks, I had volunteers offering their time, local businesses pledging donations, and Javier promising to help with the financial structuring. For once, the house filled with voices not of grief, but of people planning, creating, healing. One afternoon, while meeting with a hospital coordinator, I was introduced to a boy named Gabriel. He was 8, his hair patchy from chemotherapy, his eyes wide with both fear and a longing that pierced me to the core. He had lost his parents to an accident the year before, and though distant relatives had briefly taken him in, they had eventually left him at the hospital, unwilling to shoulder the burden of his care. When I knelt beside his bed, he looked at me with the same quiet strength Daniel had once carried as a child. "Are you here for me?" he asked softly. My throat tightened. "Yes, Gabriel. I'm here for you." From that day forward, he became a part of my life. At first, it was simple reading to him, bringing him meals, staying by his side during long treatment sessions. But soon, the bond grew deeper. He began to call me Nana, his little voice filling the hollow places in my heart. I moved him into my home, transforming Daniel's old room into a space of bright colors and toys, where laughter replaced sorrow. Together, Gabriel and I started planting a garden in the backyard. His small hands fumbled with the seeds, his face lighting up whenever the first green shoots broke through the soil. "These are ours," he would say proudly, watering them each morning. I couldn't help but smile, seeing Daniel in his determination, his will to nurture life even in fragile soil. Weeks turned to months, and the nonprofit grew stronger. Families reached out, cancer patients found support, and abandoned souls discovered a community that refused to forget them. And all the while, I felt Daniel's presence in the quiet moments, the way the wind brushed through the garden leaves, the way the ocean whispered when Gabriel and I walked along the shore. One evening, we carried a framed photo of Daniel to the beach. The sky bled orange and pink as the waves curled gently at our feet. Gabriel held the picture carefully, his thin arms steady despite the wind. "Who is he, Nana?" he asked, peering at the smiling man in the photograph. "He was my son," I said softly, my voice trembling with love. "And everything I do now, I do for him." We placed the photo by the shoreline, letting the tide wash near it without sweeping it away. For a moment, it felt as if Daniel stood there with us, watching, approving, finally at peace. Gabriel slipped his hand into mine. "Then he lives in me too, doesn't he?" I bent down, kissing his forehead, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Yes, darling. He does." From that day on, healing became not just my journey, but ours. The bitterness I once carried against Brianna began to fade, not because she deserved forgiveness, but because I refused to let her poison linger in my soul. Justice had been served, her grip broken, and Daniel's legacy now blossomed through every smile Gabriel gave me, through every patient we helped, through every flower that bloomed in our little garden. I had walked through fire, through betrayal, grief, and loss. But out of the ashes, I had found something I thought was gone forever: hope. Moral lesson, soft vocabulary, richly detailed encouragement. When betrayal crushes the heart, nurture life with love. In planting hope for others, we heal the broken soil within ourselves. Don't forget to like this story, subscribe for more, share it with friends, and comment below what lesson touched you most.